you right now. We're going to probably have some other folks join us as we go through. But am I correct with that, Melissa? I can't see the whole screen. So.
That is correct. We don't have anyone in the waiting room. Allison has joined us, and I've started recording.
All right, sounds good. So, Allison, we look forward to hearing from you and engaging in the conversation. We're going to go ahead and continue to go through the materials of today's August 27th request for application work group for the Youth Development Council. My name is Paul Sell. I am an associate director here at Youth Development Oregon, and will be helping, I can't talk, helping to facilitate today's conversation. Next slide, please. And I think I turn it over to Sally.
Yeah, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. I'm Sally Deck. I am the Future Ready Program Analyst and will be the other facilitator for this conversation. The agenda, oh, I just found another typo. The agenda for today, not August 16th, but August 27th, is on the slide here. And so we're going to go through some quick introductions and review kind of the structure and the agreements that we have for this work group. We'll go through the recap of what happened at the last meeting, which was on August 16th. Today, we're going to talk about reviewer assignment and tabulation meetings, as well as the general process for how grant applications are evaluated. We'll also talk about the meeting times that are now scheduled for October, November. Allison, I see that you've renamed yourself to show that you are a guest or stakeholder. Super appreciate that. I think the rest of us, oh, and I see Sam joining. Sam, when you have a chance, if you can update your name in Zoom to show that you are a YDC member, that would be really useful. And Melissa, let's go to the next slide. And so let's just popcorn the YDO staff, and then I'll call on our guests so that they know when it's their opportunity just to state name, organization, role, and then your familiarity with YDO's grants and RFA process. And then, like Sam just did, if you can also drop that in the chat, that's super helpful for people to be able to refer back to. So I'm Sally Deck. I am a grant manager and program analyst for the Future Ready grants, and I will pass it to Jared.
Good afternoon. I'm Jared Shaw, grant manager and workforce analyst at YDO, and I will pass it to Bill.
Good morning, Bill Hansel, data lead and grant manager, and I'll pass it to Cord.
Hey, it's Cord Bucher, Deputy Director, and I will pass it over to Tanisha.
Sorry, I was still muted. Thank you, Cord. Tanisha Bishop here to take notes, Youth Grant Administrative Specialist, and I'll pass it to Melissa.
Thanks, Tanisha. Melissa Gallardo. I am Executive Support Specialist for YDO. Includes both our staff and our council. Thanks. Bill, have you gone yet? Sorry, I always miss the last person.
Melissa, you are handling all of the behind the scenes pieces. Okay, that you're not also listening to what's happening. I got it. I would love to have everybody else, the non-staff, also introduce themselves. And so Allison, since you're the first on the call, if you don't mind coming off camera or coming on camera and just introducing yourself, we'd sure appreciate that.
Sure. Yeah. Hi, how's it going? Thanks for hosting this. My name is Allison Spector. I'm the development director at Project Lemonade. We're a organization that supports and serves youth and teens in the child welfare system and foster care. And yeah, we have not been through this process, so just kind of jumping on to learn more and make sure that we know how it all works.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Now that I see that you're with Project Lemonade, I recognize you. I'm glad. Welcome back. Glad you're here again to learn some more. Sam, I'll go ahead and pass it to you to introduce yourself.
Good morning, everybody. Sam Cole. I work for Oregon Department of Ed. Even though YDO is part of Oregon Department of Ed, they're a different, branch of Oregon Department of Ed. But I'm not part of Youth Development Organization. And at Department of Ed, I work with students in our juvenile justice facilities and our then residential treatment facilities operated by Oregon Health Authority, Department of Human Services, and Oregon Youth Authority. And that's what I did. And I think another thing was familiarized, like how familiar and with the YDO's grant process and RFA. Um, I've been a reviewer for these grants for quite a while, ever since I got involved with Oregon Commissions and Children's and Families. Yeah, so yeah, and I have to just say it's improved and it's become a lot less cumbersome over the years, and it's so much easier now. And I'm gonna I keep my camera off, because yeah, for bandwidth and stuff.
No problem. I'm really glad you're here. Thank you, Sam. Andy, I'll pass it to you.
Hello, my name's Andy Leonard. Let me get my face on there. There I am. I'm a juvenile crime prevention grant person, recovery mentor for the Confederate Tribes of Warm Springs, also for the 9 tribes, Oregon 9 tribes representative for Oregon Youth Development Council.
We're so glad you're here. Thank you. All right, Melissa, let's go to the next slide. Unless there are other folks who I can't see who are here who we need to have do an introduction. All right, cool. Let's go to the next slide. All right, just a recap of the structure of this work group. This is designed as a recurring touch point for stakeholders, staff, council members to be in conversation about the 25-27 RFA components and process. This is a non-binding dialogue, and our intention is to increase transparency around our funding, the scope, RFA development, and a lot of the details around the processes that we have used in the past and are continuing to use, as well as those that we're updating as part of continuous improvement. Next slide, please. So our agreements for the work group is that we keep the conversation on our current agenda topics. We also have opportunities to talk about or ask questions about other things that might need to surface in the future. We use our 25-27 continuous improvement areas and the YDO equity lens to guide our discussions. We give priority to members of the Youth Development Council and invited participants, but also we use chat, we use the reaction functions. We have consistently had plenty of time for folks to come off mute, come on camera, and ask questions and be deeply involved in engaging conversations. They're all really helpful for us. We ask that folks do remain muted until they're called on by a facilitator, and we prefer that you have your camera on while you're speaking. And then we also ask that we all stay committed to the allotted time for our share outs and our facilitation. Today, we're going to have plenty of time to get through all of our content and also plenty of time to answer questions that surface. Next slide. So as a recap for what we talked about last time, there's also a recording of that entire conversation. So all the details are recorded and available. But what we talked about was the updates that we're proposing we make to the rubric. And the rubric is used by the evaluators in order to essentially grade or numerically quantify how they perceive an application to be. So the responses are newly defined, and all of those definitions are, like I said, in that other video that you can reference if you need to. But we are intending that there is greater clarity in the rubric so that it's easier for reviewers to access the evaluations, and also that it's easier for applicants to understand why their application was rated in a certain way. We also talked about a proposal for how we will release and time the RFAs. And a lot of this has to do with the internal workings, particularly around procurement, and that because of the number of applications that we get, releasing the RFAs sequentially will hopefully create a smoother process for everybody involved. So the intention is that the re-engagement grants, the RFA would be released in late winter or early spring of 2025. About 3 weeks after that, the community investment RFA will be released, and that the workforce RFA would be released last. The timing of the workforce RFA is contingent on legislative process and progress. So right now we don't know that there will be any additional funding or any additional reporting requirements. But in the event that the legislation, if legislation passes, we may need to update that RFA to reflect that. So that's why that one will be done last and will not hold up the other RFAs. As we've done in the past, the RFA application window is intended to be about 60 days long to give everybody plenty of time to respond to it. And our hope is that our goal is to begin our intent to awards, starting with the re-engagement awards, and that would happen in mid to late summer of 2025. I'm going to pause right there. Does anybody have any questions, or is there anything there, Paul, that you thought that I needed to say more about? All right, Paul's good. All right, Melissa, let's go to the next slide. So just for oh, Sam's got a question. Fire away, Sam.
Okay, so the previous slide had days. Is it calendar days or is it working days? Just wanted clarification on that.
Oh, the RFA window of 60 days?
Yes, I think that was a question, right, Sam?
Yeah,
No, is it calendar days or working days? That's my question.
Yeah, those would be calendar days.
Okay.
Okay. I'm just trying to think if there's anywhere in there that we have anything that wouldn't be calendar days. Another way to say it is 2 months. The RFA application window will be about 2 months long. And if you have other questions, let me know. All right, let's go back to, let's go back to the next slide. Yeah. Thanks, Sam. So an overview of the 2023-2025 RFA process is going to be some valuable context for what we talk about next. So the biennium that we are currently in, that RFA was open in spring of 2023. We had more than 400 total applications across the 3 RFAs, asking for almost $80 million from about 240 organizations. And with that, if you bounce down to the bottom of the slide, we were able to award about 37% of applications, just under $30 million in total awards, and about 104 total organizations were awarded. So this is just kind of to paint the picture of how many applications we had last time, and that we have reason to believe that we would have about the same number of applications in the 25-27 process. And that is why we are aiming to create as smooth of a process as possible. So in our last review process, we had more than 80 people volunteer to review and evaluate the applications. And we used review teams that each team had 3 members. There were almost 30 total teams. So 20 for community investment, 5 for future ready, and 4 for re-engagement. And that allowed about 12 to 15 applications assigned to each team that then the individuals reviewed. So, and that just reflects how many applications were in each one of those grant initiatives. And so each individual reviewer reviewed between 12 and 15 applications on average. And that included the evaluation process of that there were minimum qualification reviews that happened. There were independent reviews and scoring by those volunteers. And in the 23-25 RFA process, we didn't end up using tabulation meetings. They weren't required in the RFA process. And our intent was really to have as smooth and fair as a process as possible. And tabulation meetings were not used. We were able to have our intent to award announcement in July. So July 19th, 2023 was when we were able to announce all of the awards. And that was with the RFA process, the RFA's opening. Paul, remind me, was it May 1st that they opened or April 1st that they opened?
I think it was March, at some point in March, that they opened. I don't
Oh,
remember the exact
because they
date.
closed May 1st. That was what I was remembering.
Correct. Yep.
So March and April, they were, so for about 2 months, about 60 days, they were open in March and April. And then May and June was when evaluators were able to review all of the applications. And then we were able to do the ranking and have the intent to award go out on July 19th. So so just that it was the timing and the context of how many applications we were working with and the timeline that we ended up in for the 23-25 process. And I think that's all I've got. Paul, do you have anything else we should add to that?
No, I think you said it well. So thank you for covering that.
All right, I think I'm going to pass it to you.
All right. So Melissa, if you want to advance the slide, and I think one of the things that when Sal and I were preparing this slide deck, we thought it was important to give some context because we're going to dive into kind of that evaluation aspect of this process, right? We obviously have a competitive application process as part of these grants, and so wanted to give some context of what we were trying to balance as we refine some of these processes. So this slide is just some summary of opportunities for improvement that were identified in a third-party review of our processes after this last RFA, and so some of the areas that specifically apply to the evaluation process is that the reviewer recommended that we should consider clearly communicating if tabulation meetings will be used or are optional in terms of the process. It also stated that if we are randomly assigning reviewers, it's not a required part of it, but if we are randomly assigning reviewers, we should wait to assign reviewers until all applications are available for assignment. And by that, actually, just a little clarification on that. That's we do that initial review or that minimum qualifications review that can be delayed. And so that's specifically referencing to that. YDD should take steps to avoid duplicate assignment of applications. And so there's some processes that had to happen in terms of assigning it, and there's some human error factor in that. So we should take steps to avoid that. And then lastly, YDD should consider fairness and optics of contracting reviewer or contacting, reviewers while application review window is open. And so there's always some challenges in terms of if people have questions and what does that look like. So defining how we should consider that and what the optics are of that process. So I want to pause there because we did have a few folks join. And Sam, before I turn it back to Sally to get introductions, did you have a question? Your hand was raised. I just wanted to check in.
Okay, so I'm looking at the slide, and then things happen. Like, yeah, and I remember 1 year after the process was completed, like a group, like they couldn't read or they didn't read all their RFAs, so I was part of a group that had to read, another set of grants in a short amount of time because the other group couldn't or whatever.
Mhm.
So like I hope like whatever process that is developed will build in flexibility for anomalies such as that, because if that weren't allowable, then that group of grants that couldn't get reviewed by another set or whatever, they would have not gotten funded. So that's my only input. And then yeah, I'm just saying, um, I'm just putting my 2 cents in that. And I think that's what this meeting is for, right? To add in our 2 cents and
Exactly.
our feedback, right?
Yep.
Do you guys remember that one time for that 1 year that happened?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
we've had several challenges within it and that. And Sam, I think you're highlighting a really important piece that as a team we're wrestling with of like how do we do that? And so the next few slides, you're a great lead in, but I want to before we get to the next slides of that lead in that you just threw up there, I want to go ahead and turn it back to Sally for some introductions because I see some new folks joining.
Yeah, Melissa, if you don't mind jumping back to slide number 3. Is that the right slide? Yeah, thanks. A couple people have joined, and I maybe said the wrong slide number. The next slide, the slide that has the introduction information. Yeah, that one. We have a couple people who just joined, one who is well known to me and another who is not. So I'm going to start Destiny. Oh, and we've got more folks adding. This is perfect timing. Welcome. Destiny, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, and you can see on the slide that's right there, we're hoping just to learn your name, organization, your familiarity with YDO's youth grants, and also RFA process. And then if you can just drop that information in the chat as well, that would be great. Looks like you're still muted.
Sorry, I thought that I was dropping it in the chat. But yes, hi everybody. My name is Destiny Nyambo. I'm with Impact Northwest, specifically with our youth career economic development programs, core as well as super fresh. And within our agency, we've had we've gone through multiple processes with multiple programs that we have available. And so this past round, we went through the process of writing and receiving the Future Ready Oregon, as well as our community investment grants. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Excellent. We're really glad you're here. Thank you. And Brian, if you don't mind popping on camera and saying hello, that'd be great.
Of course. Thanks, Sally. Thanks, team. Brian Detman, Youth Development, Oregon Director. Really pleasure to be here and listen in. And yeah, a lot of this represents great work, important work happening by our grant managers. And yeah, this is, was hearing Sam's question / point, like how do we kind of create some things that have some more clarity, maybe a little more definition, but also allowing for flexibility. Like we'll try to find some line there or some space, and I imagine we'll do our best. We won't necessarily make everybody happy, but it's a dance that we continually try to achieve and just to improve from one biennium to the next. So I appreciate everybody's input and attendance today and also in the coming weeks and months.
Thanks, Brian. And Conrad, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, we'd love to hear your organization and your familiarity with YDO.
Yes, Conrad Hurdle, managing consultant of FC Hurdle Consulting LLC. And I know of your organization being a former educator for the state of Oregon, principal serving Portland Public Schools, and now having my own consulting firm. So I know of your work, and I serve clients who have access to your opportunities and programming. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. I appreciate that. Do we have anyone else who popped in? The names kind of dance around a little bit. All right. Then let's jump back to slide number 9, and I'll pass it back to Paul.
Wonderful. Thanks on that. And it looked like somebody had jumped on and then maybe came off. I don't know who that was, but Melissa, we're good to go. Keep going. All right, perfect. All right. So if you want to go to just the next slide, please. And so and again, Sam, thanks for that lead in terms of that flexibility piece. You'll see some of that. Hopefully you'll see some of that, and we want to engage in that conversation as we kind of show what the proposed updates around evaluation is for us on that piece. And then also, Sam, of course, please keep using those functions. Raise your hand. Sally and I, as well as team, are trying to watch to make sure that the chat's being monitored as well as any of those reactions, and being the size of group we are, we can probably pause as we kind of go through, but we also do have some guiding questions that we'll pause at as well. But feel free to raise your hand and we'll try to address the questions as we go. So when we look at the evaluator assignment and tabulation meetings, you saw some of those initial notes that that third-party review had seen, and so some of the major proposed updates that we are considering around application evaluation is to first is just clarify that the evaluators are the independent reviewers of individual applications. When we look back and look through our materials from previous years, and processes, those words are kind of used interchangeably, and really the evaluators are the ones that provide the scores. We do some initial review, right, upfreeing to make sure that their applicants are eligible to apply, and then it moves to those evaluators that provide the scores and overall that contribute to the ranking of applications. Evaluator assignment, we are planning to shift away from those reviewer teams and use random evaluator assignments to 8+ individual applications. You saw last time the average was 12 to 15, depending on the number of reviewers we have. But instead of grouping those applications, it would be randomly assigned. So there won't be on that side. Minimum of 3 evaluators per application. So we would randomly assign those evaluators per application. And then evaluator pools would be assigned to each RFA. And there's a lot of things that kind of go into assigning evaluator pools. So for example, the last time, if you were applying in re-engagement opportunity grant, you were eligible to be able to apply you're eligible to be an evaluator in other of RFAs that we are offering. And I wouldn't anticipate that necessarily changing, but due to conflict of interest as well as timing, being that grants will be released sequentially, there will probably be some timing when people can help us be evaluators on that side. Those evaluators can be part of the multiple evaluator pools, assuming that they're eligible in terms of that. And then applications reassigned due to a conflict of interest or incomplete application. That's some of those challenges that Sam was alluding to, will be assigned randomly to the available of evaluators within the pool. And so timing of that, if it's early on in the application process, we have a large evaluator pool, but sometimes as time gets there and narrower, or sometimes that evaluator pool would be smaller, but we'd still randomly assign in terms of those of eligible evaluators. And then lastly, just for clarification, it said to clarify if tabulation meetings were going to be used, and we're not planning on using tabulation meetings for the community investment, the re-engagement opportunity grant, or the workforce RFAs that are anticipated to come out in regards to that. So I'm going to pause. I see Sam has his hand raised. And so Sam?
Okay, so tabulation meetings, were those the meetings where like the group of evaluators met to discuss their scores? Okay,
Yes.
so is there a reason why no tabulation meetings will not be utilized in the future?
That's a great question. And part of the front loading that Sally did in terms of those 400 applications that we received across those RFAs is one of the major factors of it. That's why we're specifically stating for these applications, we anticipate, sorry, again, I can't talk very well today. We anticipate large numbers of applications. And so when we looked at using tabulation meetings in the last RFA, we were going to have to schedule approximately an hour and a half to 2 hour meetings with those 29 review teams, and all evaluators on those review teams were required to attend. And so what we made the determination of that is it didn't have a large enough, it didn't really adjust the scores when all said was done when we looked at it statistically. But then that's really the main reason why. So that scheduling conflict and those opportunities to review was a pretty massive undertaking. And the other note to that is that part of the challenge in terms of scheduling that is the single point of contact is the one that refers to that. So we have that single person in procurement that facilitates those conversations. So the time involved was going to be pretty extensive in terms of and delay ultimately the intent to awards. So Sam, I want to check in if I gave you a lot of detail there, but I also know that you've been a part of these meetings, so I thought it was important. And then also check with the team to see if they have anything to add. So Sam, did I address your question?
Yes. Yes. So basically, it's a logistical nightmare. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And
a great
then
way to summarize it. Yeah,
yeah, and then
appreciate that.
and with the volume and number of applicants and the reviewers, yeah, to schedule, especially with 8 reviewers. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
and
jump
the other,
I'll jump in and say
yep,
also that we did do research, and Bill could speak to the numbers on this, about whether or not tabulation meetings in the past had significantly changed who was awarded, and that because the tabulation meetings didn't show to have an impact on who was awarded, on which ones were awarded, was another major contributor to us not choosing to do the tabulation meetings last year. So what we saw was it was going to take a tremendous amount of time, it was going to pretty seriously delay the intent to award and not change who was awarded. And Cord, I'll maybe have you speak to that more eloquently as well.
I don't know if I can speak to that more eloquently, but what I was going to add, I think to go back to one of the changes that we're proposing to actually move away from review teams where you're really locking 3 reviewers together, that creates logistical challenges, right? Because it's all volunteers. As you have conflicts of interest identified, and then you have to pull an application to a different team or pull a reviewer out, or one reviewer on a team can't finish reviews and you have to bring in an additional reviewer to that team. Like that is very complicated to manage, and it's reached a scale where that is really difficult. And then you add trying to get everyone back together for these meetings. And so the thinking about getting away from team assignment and looking at randomization at the application level so that every application is getting randomly assigned 3 reviewers versus teams being the building block, that gives us a lot more flexibility to ensure that we're doing randomization well, to ensure there's fairness, that everyone's getting, a fair shake in terms of reviewer assignment and the same number of reviewers. And it removes all these challenges around managing the team structure, which is difficult both like just in itself, and also we're doing it all within SM Apply, which is the tool we use for applications and reviews, and that can also be really just challenging within that system to manage the team. So kind of just adding a little more of it by moving towards what might be a more manageable way of assigning the reviews. It kind of takes us out of the team format, and that then makes it impossible to really do the reviewer meetings, if I understand the sort of vision for this going forward. Does that all track, Paul and Sally?
Yeah, I was going to say I appreciate the clarification on that side too. So some of the things when we looked at that third-party review, some of those pieces like that duplicate assignment of evaluators. So the more times that we have to touch in terms of assignment of it, so like we can use systems to randomly assign, and so I appreciate Cord you pointing that out, so that logistically it cleans up things quite a bit in addition to saving the time around that. And I know Bill, you did a large part of that work as well. So do you have things you wanted to add?
Yeah, I would just throw in that what the Sally was almost spot on with her. What the analysis found is that it will change scores, but we don't know how that will impact the outcome. And so that slight difference there. And so at the end of the day, a lot of work without knowing if it will have any impact. I think would be the fair way to say it. It may or it may not, but either way, it was a lot of work for an unknown, and that's ultimately, I think, what the decision last biennium was. This biennium, as has been stated, there are other technical issues related to it with the randomization and SurveyMonkey, so I won't belabor that, but just wanted to add that.
Appreciate that, Bill, and kind of just to put some numbers on that. So with the 29 teams at 2 hours apiece, we're just under 60 hours of dedicated time, not mentioning the prep around that. And so when we looked at what that would do and impact of this intent to awards, it was going to be considerable delay into it, because you can do one to maybe two of those meetings logistically in trying to coordinate folks each day, and so that you can imagine the impact that might have in terms of our timeline to inform applicants. Sam, I saw your hand up.
And Bill, thank you for the clarification. Because I sat in tabulation meetings in the past, and I remember based on the discussion, certain reviewers did change their scores. Now, whether that impacted whether those grants did get awarded or not, that I don't know, because we just did our scores, So because there's sometimes because it's written, and and then like we may misread things or misinterpret things, and then having the discussion with fellow reviewers, change, some people's scores, I've changed my scores, others have changed their scores, and then that's the richness. And then I think the randomization is rich in a part where also everyone brings in a different perspective, especially for me being a state worker, I have my perspective, but the youth, they have a different perspective, as their reviewers. So I like the fact that it's going to be random. But I totally get it. The tabulation meetings, it's a logistical nightmare, but I feel that we're gonna lose some richness and an opportunity, for dialogue, but I get it. Yeah. It's not possible.
And Sam, I appreciate that, because I think it's one of those things as a team we've definitely been wrestling with of where does that look, and so just to kind of note that we specifically called out the three of our largest RFAs, as we're not going to use the tabulation meetings in that, and so other review processes, smaller review processes, may still implement that. It'll be a decision based on each of the RFAs that we are processing, because I think there is some value. Plus, I think reviewers enjoy the opportunity to engage in conversation, and even if it isn't around score adjustments or clarifications of that. So I think a really, really important point. So I appreciate that. Before I move on, just want to make sure that I didn't miss anybody else's comments. Actually, Melissa, you can probably bump it to the next slide because it's exactly what we've been doing, discussing the evaluator assignments, the tabulation meeting, and evaluation pool, or evaluator pool, not evaluation pool, evaluator pool. So I don't know if other folks have comments or questions around that or thoughts.
Paul, I would add one thing too, and that's to let Sam know as well that there is no question that there's value to those meetings for the reasons stated. Um, Another thing that relates to this is with our increased commitment to the rubric, we're hoping that that will in it itself address some of the need for the tabulation. So the hope is that what we would increase what we call inter-rater reliability or agreement because of training and the new rubric and so forth like that. So the idea would be that there is less variance among scores and thus would reduce the need for the tabulation. So those kind of two things are going hand in hand as well. And I wanted to emphasize that.
Yeah, Bill, I appreciate that because I think one of the things that you and I have talked about is that it's kind of a give and take of recognizing some of that time commitment with the tabulation means if we can front load that through some of that evaluator training, spend a little bit more time looking at that rubric and being purposeful there, I think is a critical element to that work. So great discussion. I appreciate that. And oh, I also want to put into the space that Cord had given an example of some of the things that we had seen in during those tabulation meetings for sure.
Well, I saw Brian's hand, but he took it
Oh,
down, but I just wanted to see if he needed to say anything.
thanks. I didn't miss
I
that.
was like acknowledging the points. It was a clap. It was a hand clap to
Okay,
Bill's point, to Cord's point, just clapping my hands, but
perfect.
with a little whatever
Yeah. Thanks,
emoji.
Brian. The emoji. Yeah. No, yeah, I appreciate that. All right. So we'll keep moving forward and again, encourage folks to that. So Melissa, if you want to bump it to the next slide would be great. Um, so then when we think about the evaluation process and guidance, and this is one of it's going, Sam, like I said, you couldn't have led in better to this conversation with the challenges of evaluations and reviewers and volunteer reviewers, right? We can't predict some of those opportunities and those opportunities for us to figure out kind of how to best address are going to come up. And so a couple pieces that with the evaluation process and guidance that we really want to be clear with is to clarify the evaluation process and the order of it. And this is outlined in the RFA, but we have our application window, which Sally had talked about in our summary, that's going to be right around that 60 calendar days or 2 months. Then we do that initial eligibility review. And this is kind of that yes/no questions that we will really focus on if an applicant is eligible to apply for that RFA in terms of the scope and are they an eligible entity under the requirements for that RFA. And then evaluator training and assignment. So we're going to spend, I would say, we're going to invest more time and effort in terms of that specifically, and we already have in terms of clarifying the rubric, giving some guidance along that way. And we talked a little bit about that last time. And then we move into that. Initial minimum qualification review. So meeting the minimum qualifications for the grant. So if you are maybe serving an age group outside of the range, then you wouldn't be obviously eligible to apply for that grant. So workforce grants are 16 to 24, for example. If you were intending to serve 10 through 12-year-olds, you wouldn't be able to apply for that grant. And then once all of that stuff happens, then we move into evaluator review window, which then we open it up to our volunteer evaluators to do their independent scoring of each application. Again, it would be randomly assigned through that process on that side, which would be a bit of a shift there. And then we move into the application score calculations and ranking. So once all the evaluators have submitted their scores, then we move into the process of score calculations because not all questions are always the same point value, and we have to add the scores and do those ranking according to the RFA. And then that's when the issuance of the intent to awards is created. And so that's the process that will be outlined in the RFA. And then Sam, I'll get to you in just a second. I see your hand. But then the next slide, which Melissa, we don't need to go there yet. If you want to go back, sorry. We're going to also outline that process in the RFA, which we sort of did there. There's more detail, obviously, in the RFA, but then to address those unknowns or those questions, those common challenges that we have in the evaluation process, to create additional internal guidance for increased consistency and accuracy. And so that we have a process. So if there's something comes up, an evaluator misses a score, for example, how do we handle that process specifically so that we are consistent across every application and RFA in that process? So I'm going to pause there, Sam. I see your hand. So
Yes, can we go back to the previous screen, please? Okay, great. Okay. Oh no, yeah, yes. This okay, so um and I know you guys are smart enough, but I'm wondering if the um tool that you guys will utilize are smart enough. Like for instance, like for the evaluator assignments and the evaluator pool, I'm wondering if the evaluators will be assigned like categories or roles such as like community member, youth member, state employee, or like so forth, so that if to prevent a certain like having all three reviewers all be youth, and then all three reviewers just being all state employees, or all three, So I'm wondering if there's any thought on like when people apply or register to become an evaluator, they will select different types of roles that they um so that the lens that they're looking at, reading through the grants, will have a fair share of, distribution of people. I'm wondering if that was there any thought of that?
Um, so I think that is a great question, and so just being transparent, that is not something that is factored into our random reviewer assignment in the past, and it isn't something that we've really looked at the logistics of. I think it's something that we probably want to wrestle with as a team of if that's a feasible element. So one of the challenges that I know that we would have to consider addressing would be is of the 80 reviewers, if we only have using numbers of if we need 80 reviewers and we only have 10. Thank you, Allison. I appreciate you joining us for that. So just want to acknowledge that you were here and again appreciate your time today. But if we only have 10 uh, state employees, for example, out of a review evaluator pool of 80, how do we balance those reviews so that those folks don't get overly taxed? And so that's just something we'd have to wrestle with. Not saying that it's not something as something we won't want to consider, because I think it is. You bring up a really good point, right? Because that lens is important. And I know that Bill may have some comments around from the rubric of trying to establish that standard rubric on that side. But I think it's something why we need to take back to the team and why we have these meetings. But others have comments or thoughts, or be able to talk better than I can for some reason. Well, nobody came off mute on that one. All right.
So
So
I was wondering, for the past reviewers, those 80, and I know we may not have the data. Like, do you know what roles most of them were? Like, were they mostly youth, mostly community members? If we don't have the data, we don't have the data. But that I'm just wondering. Yeah, that's
that's
fine.
a great example. I actually haven't looked at that data. Having been the one that coordinated the evaluators this last RFA, we had a very broad mix. We had YDO staff, we had Oregon Department of Education staff, HEC staff were kind of the three state agencies that really showed up in force to help us with those reviews. We had a ton of volunteers that were retired educators or just passionate around youth services that came in. Our smallest pool, I can pretty confidently say, was around youth reviewers. I think we had 5 or 6 youth reviewers at most as part of that process as well. So we're always trying to figure out that balance for sure. But it's and just for those that haven't maybe heard about our process, we use our government gov delivery system, which is our email system that we put out a request for reviewers, and reviewers then would submit. This last time they submitted a Google form of interest, and then they connected with myself and staff to get coordinated and scheduling wise and those efforts of where it made sense for them to do it. And again, working with procurement around conflict of interest. But other questions or thoughts that the team may have? Brian, I saw you come online, so I didn't know if you wanted to add something.
Well, I'll just say quickly, I mean, Sam, appreciate the questions, and I think that's something for us to, and Paul, maybe you just kind of said this, for us to kind of take in and consider about what additional worker capacity that would require to like, know what roles people fill. It may be too, like on the youth one, if we're talking about youth, the federal definition for involvement in our council is under 28. We might have actually had more people who are under
Good
28,
point.
Paul,
That's a good
right?
point. That's a good point.
That of the 5 people we knew about, I think I have a sense of who you're talking about. They were probably in some way connected to either our council or one of our committees, but there could have been more folks under. So it's an interesting piece about how we define community reviewer. And it's something I guess we can think about while balancing the system's ability to help us do that, like the needs around moving through some process and some deadlines. So something for us to, I think, kind of just take in and think about. Sally, I see you have your hand up.
I don't know that I need to say anything else other than I love that this question has come to the surface. And what I'm hearing is really around like the diversity of the evaluators while also maintaining fairness for those who are evaluated, that there is an equitable amount of expertise and diverse perspectives that are reviewing, and for us to take to heart that we can do to see what we can do to diversify the evaluator pool, while also maintaining again that like integrity and fairness of who is evaluating each of the applications, while trying to stay as timely as possible and get through the application pool that we anticipate we'll have. So thank you, Sam. That was a very interesting question.
I wish Abe was here because he's our Survey Monkey apply guy, because I know he'd actually probably be researching if it's even logistically possible in our system that we currently use. So I think that's the other piece that we want to look at is in that randomization. One of the, I think our goals as a team is to reduce the possibility of human error and just that how many times we have to touch it. So that's something that I think we need to wrestle with. And Brian, I think you kind of alluded to that as well. So I appreciate it. Sam, I saw you come off. I just want to make sure that you didn't have anything to add before I jump on. Come off. Back on.
Yeah, I just don't want, I was just asking that question, because this is the process, right? This is the time to bring it up, so yeah, I just hope, it's not like I wanted to create more work for you guys, but I was just wondering if SM Apply could do it, and then so forth,
Well, and
and
I think so I was just going to acknowledge, I think that's the reason why I think we felt very inclined to do these work group meetings, because you're bringing up questions that I think are important for us to think about, right? And what and when it comes out, we have to look at and weigh all the options within that work. And so I appreciate that thoughtfulness. And I think Sally, you said it really well in terms of balance, right? Is that piece. Other thoughts? Sally or Melissa, sorry, I'm getting my people confused. If you want to bump 2 slides ahead, please.
Sure, Paul, I was just going to draw your attention to what Hillary put in the chat, if you can see that, or
Oh,
if you want to share that
yeah,
out loud.
Sorry, no, I
absolutely.
think I just sent that to you, Melissa. Sorry.
Oh, you did? Oh, sorry.
No, it's okay. I was trying not to take over the conversation. I think this question is really timely and it seems to be on a lot of people's minds. At the HEC, we've started getting like reviewer interest forms. We've started producing those as a link that we would send out in like our Gov delivery or whatever. And then we would have in that form like things for the reviewers to self-select. So are you a youth that is, 28 and younger? Are you an industry professional with this specific skill? It depends on the application that we're looking to get reviewers for. Anyway, we have a number of things for people to kind of self-select so that we can have an idea of who's making up these reviewer pools to kind of start gathering that data. And then we've also started kind of segmenting some of our RFA review into segments that really demand like a professional level of expertise versus those that can be more publicly assessed or reviewed. We had some technical questions in our past reviews that a lot of our public reviewers were kind of uncomfortable feeling like they were scoring. So we
took that feedback and modified what pieces we're asking from our publicly invited reviewers versus who we're asking, the pieces that we're asking from like state staff that have specific data expertise to inform a technical score.
I think that's a really important point. Yeah. And something else I think we want to wrestle with as we think about what that looks like. And also, Hillary, just bring space. I know you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, but I appreciate you joining today. Hillary's from the Higher Education Coordinating Commission, so I appreciate that and has been a part of a couple of these other conversations. All right, so Melissa, if we want to go ahead and go 2 slides ahead, would be great. Looking at my other screen to make sure I know what I'm looking for. And so when you saw me reference this in the previous slide around evaluation process guidance. And so there's a lot of things in terms of how we can maintain our consistency as a team that is doing this work behind the scenes, right? Once we assign it. And so while we, randomly assign evaluators, maybe what's stated in the RFA as part of our process, how we go about doing that and the details. So it doesn't matter if myself or Sally or Bill are doing the process, we maintain consistency, and we want to make sure that we do that in a manner. And so what we are proposing to do is to create an evaluation process guidance, which is an internal guidance document that we use to make sure that we aid in that consistent application of outlined RFA processes. And this kind of goes back to what that third-party review highlighted. So the evaluation assignment process, what does it mean to be random and how does that look, right? And so that we do it consistently. If we use the SurveyMonkey apply randomization piece, what are the processes to do that? Inconsistencies across process or evaluation of an application. One of the challenges that we see is sometimes an evaluator accidentally misses an evaluation point score. So, and somehow it gets through that system. So how do we deal with that process and that question? Applications requiring a reassignment or rescore. Sometimes evaluators get sick and are unable to complete. What does that process look like? How do we manage that process? Duplicate scoring of an application. Hopefully we reduce that through the randomization process that we outlined, but you saw that called out as part of that third-party review. Evaluator contact during evaluation window. So there are some needs sometimes when an evaluator has a question. They're like, I can't access a SurveyMonkey apply or my reviewer portal. So what does that look like? What does that mean? Or if there's an inconsistency in a score that we just need some clarification, how do we manage and how do we do that process? So outlining that. And then something I think that we need to wrestle with is for those unexpected factors like that arise, how do we address that consistently? And so do we build a team or what does that look like in terms of that? And so we are wrestling with how to best do that so that we can consistently apply this process of decision making throughout that time. So I'm going to pause there, and actually, Melissa, you can probably go to the next slide because it just is our reactions items to consider. I don't know if people had thoughts about that internal evaluation operations guidance. I don't know what that acronym looks like, but we can definitely have questions or thoughts about it. All right, we are rolling pretty quickly. This is actually, so the next slide, Melissa, is just detailing some of the dates that we have solidified for the upcoming work group meetings. So you can see the published dates of September that we had already out there. So we're going to hold 2 of these meetings in September. So I think the 6th, is that next week? Yes, that's next week, right? No? Yes. Yes, I think that is next week. So I see head nods. So yeah, sorry, Sal, I didn't mean to scare. I scared myself in that comment. Just that we got another way this next week. So we'll have some topics around next Friday that we'll do this conversation again, and then the end of September. The 2 that we've added, and you notice that we started to do monthly on this. This is because the process is going to kind of continue to move forward and actually writing the evaluation questions, which is not something we can necessarily cover in the work group conversation. But we've added the Friday, October 11th date, as well as Wednesday, November 3rd. And then just realizing now, seeing that slide, the other 2 dates, and Melissa, you may have to correct me on this. We do have our Youth Development Council meeting on September 12th. And then we have our winter one, which is, I am not even going to quote, I don't want to quote the date. Melissa, can you tell me what the December one is for me?
Our December meeting is also the 12th, December 12th.
Okay. Perfect. So we'll have those council meetings intertwined into that, and there'll be some updates from the work group at both of those meetings. I think that's the last slide that we had other than just our contact information. So I'll pause there to see if folks, oh yeah, that's perfect. Thanks. Melissa, anybody have questions or thoughts that they want to share? Thank you, Conrad. I appreciate you joining and look forward to more engaging conversations as we keep moving forward with the process. All right. So with that, again, we schedule these for 90 minutes just to make sure we have enough time for conversation, but we'll go ahead and close up this meeting then. And again, just really appreciate folks for joining us. And Brian, I should have paused to see if you have anything you want to say as people are signing off. No? All right, perfect.
No, thanks. Thanks. Go team. Thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam. Appreciate you joining us.
Thanks, Andy, too. See you in there. See you
and
again.
Andy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Destiny.
Thanks, Melissa.